Welcome to the podcast, John.
Hello.
So I want to just briefly introduce the way that I know you, which is through the First Unitarian Church in Los Angeles, which is, even though it's called First Unitarian, it's a UU church, Unitarian Universalist Church. And we've been lucky to have such a good community there, and there's so many cool people at that church, and so I'm trying to ask as many of them as possible to do conversations with me for the podcast. And so yeah, we met, I guess it was probably like a year and a half ago at church,
hmm
something like that.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you in a little later in the conversation about how you even found the church and what kind of kept you coming back and stuff. Especially because I would ask that anyway, but I feel like a lot of people don't really know much about UU. So whenever I have somebody who's kind of like part of that community, I want to talk about it because I personally think that it's just such a unique and beautiful type of religious community
hmm
that, in my mind, seems like one of the most promising, in the 21st century in terms of like the modern person and all that. So I want to start though by asking the Zen question. I've been asking all my guests the Zen question, and if you don't have a whole lot to say about it, that's fine, or whatever comes to mind when you hear the question. So the question is from an old Zen koan, and it's all things return to the one. Where does the one return to?
Interesting. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I guess you're not supposed to know, are you? Um,
Maybe not.
I don't know. It is interesting though because there's sort of the idea of the big crunch.
Hmm.
Uh, after it's like the Big Bang, and then everything sort of spreads out, and things keep spreading out, and eventually it's like, well, what happens? Like, and it's kind of a I don't know. The big crunch is sort of, I think, our way of being like, well, it could get better in a way because the alternative seems to be like everything goes to an equilibrium where there's nothing,
Hmm.
and like nothing can form and no atoms or anything. Like it's just an equilibrium of this energy. Um, and so yeah, I don't know if the one would return sort of to itself and
Yeah.
crush together and then explode again and
Right.
sort of make something new again, I think.
Right.
So maybe,
Yeah. Expansion and contraction.
yeah.
Um, have you ever seen the movie Mr. Nobody by any chance?
I have not, no.
You should check it out. I really enjoy that movie. It mentions the big crunch and it mentions all sorts of things. It's a really pretty psychedelic movie,
Mhm.
and it what I like about it is that it brings in science, but it basically stimulates the intellect and the heart
Nice.
very deeply at the same time. So it's like it makes me think about all sorts of stuff, but it makes me cry too. I'm like, oh, I
Right.
like when it can do both.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that response. I after the Zen question, I usually try to blast back to early childhood. So
Mhm.
um did you grow up in a religious family or context at all?
No, actually, I would say not at all.
Mm,
My parents, both of them, were sort of lapsed Catholics in their own way. They had sort of very complicated relationships with religion, and well, I don't know. I don't know that my mom, she was sort of a rebel, I guess. When I don't know a ton about her as a young person, but she went to Catholic school and she was a Catholic schoolgirl, but she was apparently also, one that was, she'd be smoking in the girls' room or whatever, and
mm-hmm,
stealing cars and stuff like that
mm-hmm,
in rural Florida. Um, so I don't know how much she ever was devout or anything like that.
mm-hmm.
And so she didn't really. now I think she sort of identifies as kind of pagan or like,
Mm,
Wiccan. Um, I think she still does crave something that
yeah.
has sort of the trappings of a religion, but definitely she needs the freedom. I think Catholicism was never going to work for her.
Right.
And then my dad, he actually I think he was very devout for a while. He has some pretty interesting stories. I won't tell them because they're sort of his to tell. But he was devout for a while, and then he sort of had a falling out with religion. My grandparents, especially, there's a family story. Is that my grandmother was trying to have children. She was very Catholic. Um, my grandfather, not so much. He was much more, I guess, worldly. Just my grandmother grew up and then wanted to get married. Like she did the entire you know that experience at the time, which would have been, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, trying to think the years, post World War II. Um, so she tried to have children. She tried to have as many as she could, and she miscarried several times.
Mm,
When she asked the priest, she had gone to the priest and basically asked him, what was the deal, and the priest sort of said, "You must have done something to deserve this."
oh God.
Yeah. So she refused to go to church after that. And I mean, she was still devout, like she still believed, but like
Mm,
that was just where it split for her. And my grandfather was
right.
furious. Like he was just
Yeah.
like, "We're never going to that church again. I'm going to beat the shit out of the priest." He had to
Yeah.
be like restrained, and it was just sort of like, and I don't, they didn't even go.
Hmm.
They had a very personal experience for not going. And my grandmother, like I said, she still maintains some connection to the church, um, and believed. But yeah, that was sort of, they never really, I think, because of those experiences, wanted me to have to go through something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it didn't really factor into my life as a
Mm.
kid. Um, it was sort of like something else that other people did. It was like, and I think, I credit that a little bit of just sort of my curiosity of it, of all religions. So I'm thankful for that, because I don't think that I necessarily am skewed one or the other. I mean, I've been
Hmm.
raised in, you're still raised in the not even Judeo-Christian, but Christian perspective of
Hmm.
things. But I was, much more curious about other religions, I think, than a lot of people were, who thought,
Mm,
well, I'm Christian, I can't learn about this, I can't learn about Buddhism, I can't learn about
right.
Hinduism. Um, so yeah, and the one thing I do remember that I thought was interesting, my mom would basically, I don't know what she did to like maintain our tie to the church, um, but there was a local church that she would basically maintain enough of a tie to that every year they sent kids to camp, and she really wanted us to go to camp.
Yeah.
So she did whatever I don't know if it was like you have to tithe, a certain amount or whatever, but she
Hmm.
did whatever it took to get us to go to the camp, which was, on its, I guess, supposedly Christian, but
Hmm.
it was a summer camp, so
Right.
I wanted to go because you did archery and you did swimming and you did, you
Yeah.
know, canoeing and camping,
Yeah.
and then at night, they had like puppet shows and stuff that you'd sing, I don't even remember most of the songs we sing, just
Hmm.
little hymns and stuff. Uh,
Hmm.
and even then it was just like, it was more just like, I didn't get it. like, these songs are fun. I don't, the stories are cool, but like, when it comes to like, I guess a strong belief, I guess I was raised with a strong skepticism,
Yeah.
toward things, but also a curiosity toward things.
Mm.
Um, my mom never really, like, she didn't speak ill of religion, and my dad didn't either. He actually, when I was about 12, I think we must have been in Athens. So I was probably about 12 or 13, and he decided I was old enough. So he was like, it's funny because it's like having the talk, but it's like our talk was like, "Do you want to go to church?"
Mm.
And I was like, I guess I could go. And so he's like, "Okay, I'll take you to a church and we'll go and you'll see if you like it." and if you like it, I'll keep taking you. I won't
Mm,
participate, but like,
that's
you know,
cool.
yeah. And so we went to Catholic church, and I didn't like it. Like, I didn't have anything
Yeah.
against it. It didn't speak to me on any level.
Yeah.
The thing that did speak to me most, which I was a little jealous of, was the communion. Um,
Mm,
because I don't know, there's something about rituals, especially now. I'm kind of becoming obsessed with the idea of ritual.
yeah.
But the communion I thought was fascinating, and I really wanted to participate. But my dad was like, "You
Mm,
can't because you have to go to confession."
mm,
And that was what's funny to me, because I was like, he was still in the mindset of like having the rules, because it's
right.
like he's not Catholic or anything, but he was still like, "No, you can't do that because you're supposed to go to confession
Right.
first before you
Yeah.
receive communion." And I was just like, "Oh, that's so interesting." But I was also like, "Well, that sucks. I really wanted to I wanted to try the whole thing. Like, you people get in the line." And but
Yeah.
that was about it, really. I didn't
Hmm.
yeah, there was no um I'm really happy about that. In fact, there was no forcing
Hmm.
of any, at least those sorts of belief systems. I mean, obviously everybody's sort of
Right. Right.
indoctrinated by your parents, and but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's interesting.
That's cool. Yeah. My parents are pretty traditional Christians, not Catholic, but Methodists. So I went to a Methodist church pretty much every week growing up.
Hmm.
But as when I was young, I really, I don't know. I guess I didn't think too much about it. I didn't reflect too much on all the details, and it was just a part of my life that I guess I just accepted it was part of my life. I mean, but I also didn't feel personally super connected to the belief system necessarily, or um, I usually didn't want to go to church. I wanted to just stay home and chill or hang out with friends or whatever. Like I didn't really ever want to go to church, but I was lucky to have some friends at church, which made it kind of cool. We
Yeah.
went to a pretty big church at that time, and there were just tons of people there and tons of kids, and Sunday school was cool because I had friends, and
Yeah.
so I just never had any sort of sincere or deep connection with the actual religious content when I was young. Um, but I guess I probably, I guess at the time I would have claimed that I believed those things just because that was what I was taught and that's what was imprinted upon me.
Yeah.
Um, but once I got to college, I just kind of had some spiritual experiences that made me wake up to how little I knew about what was really going on. Like, and just kind of made me consider that existence itself is so mysterious and
Yeah.
seemingly miraculous, really.
Hmm.
And so I started having seeds that were planted for me in early college. And because Christianity was the religion that I had inherited,
Yeah.
that was the one that I kind of used to first start exploring my own spirituality,
Hmm.
at that time. So those first few years of college, I read the Bible a lot. I went to small group. I went to, these little Christian tried to dip into certain Christian communities and services and events, and I was trying all different kinds of churches, and then that eventually led me to explore all sorts of other spiritual traditions and stuff. Um, and so, even though my parents basically made me go to church every week,
Hmm.
so in that way it was forceful in that way, but they
Right.
were, they never were overly strict about it. They were pretty gentle about it. And I do feel grateful that for whatever reason, I went off and explored on my own, despite the fact that I did grow up in that traditional context and grew up in an atmosphere a religious atmosphere for the most part that was not super curious about other traditions.
Right.
So I'm grateful that I somehow found that motivation on my
Yeah,
own.
it's great.
Um, so, you know, you've kind of touched on how you felt about all of that stuff when you were young. Did you, when you were a kid or a teenager or even in your adult life, like, do you feel like you've had any either spiritual experiences or or kind of paradigm shifting experiences or periods of time in your life that just have altered your worldview kind of for good?
Um, yeah, this was a tough question. I had to think. Yeah, I thought about this one a lot. Because I don't, I mean, I think you already know because you know me, but it's like I like spirituality. I don't even like that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't, again, it doesn't make sense to me
Yeah.
as a word. Like, I don't know what it refers to. Like, I get it. I've looked it up. I've seen the definition. Um, but for me, it's like, I don't know. It's just, it's still very like, there's no divide between mind body, like that, what we are. So I actually wrote some stuff down here. Actually,
Mm,
like, there's the idea of this, like, I guess the spirit of the soul, like an essence of us.
mhm.
And I don't think that's true. I don't think there is an essence of us. I think it's, that, our thoughts and emotions, they have a physical basis, that these things are all physically based. Like, there's no real, I guess it's like, is there a seat of consciousness? Is there a place and I don't think there is. I think it relies on everything. So, when I think about it, because I'm a huge sci-fi fan too, I love science fiction and speculative things. And, thinking about it, it's almost some kind of disappointing because you're like, well, could I transfer my consciousness to
Mhm.
another thing? And it's like, potentially you could transfer part of it, but your consciousness isn't just you're in your brain. Like, the way I think about it, like, I can illustrate it with a story, just a quick little one. But I went to New York and I was walking and I have back problems. I have arthritis and my back was just hurting really bad. And I kind of snapped a little bit. I was very snappish and I felt pretty bad about it. But it was just sort of like, and you can be like, well, I wasn't myself, but it's like, no, I was myself. I was
Mm.
myself in pain. And you know when you think about those sorts of things, it's like, that is you too. It's like, me
Right.
hungry is still me.
Hmm.
If I transfer my consciousness into a thing that doesn't have all of those factors, that doesn't have the pain that I have in
Mm.
certain places, that doesn't get hungry when I do, it's not you. You know what I mean? There's no, like, it'll change immediately because, like, even just thinking about when I get hungry in the morning, I plan my schedules around those things of what my body tells my brain and how my brain reacts to my body and how all of those things together. And, like, I don't know. It's also like we probably have neurons places we don't know.
Mm.
Like, they talked
Hmm.
about how your gut feeling thing is actually sort of, true, that it
Hmm.
does have, like, it does influence your mental state. I mean, all those
Yeah.
sorts of things. So it's just, I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
all of that kind of is getting away from the point.
No, no, no. That's good. Keep going.
But I have had interesting, I guess, shifts of consciousness, and I like to shift consciousness. I'm a firm believer in better living through chemistry. um, and some things. What was interesting, I think, it was almost the opposite of what I would call a paradigm shift or unusual. It was more like a usualizing experience or something where, the first time I took LSD,
Mm.
um, like, my anxiety was gone, like, just gone. It was like I felt, and not cocky even, but just I felt confidence for the, not,
Yes.
I mean, maybe not even the first time, but just like as an extended period of not feeling this constant anxiety that's over me,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was like, that's really weird, isn't it? Like, most people have opposite effects. Like, I didn't see anything. I didn't have any, and I was kind of disappointed in that too. Like, I didn't get cool visuals. I got a little bit of, like, I listened to Prince in the tub and it was neat. That was really fun. But it wasn't, I don't think it was, like I said, it wasn't paradigm shifting. But it was an interesting experience because, I realized, how much we do sort of rely on our brains and stuff that aren't fixed.
Hmm.
There are these incredibly resilient, flexible things that we can alter and change and not even on purpose. We alter and change all the time.
Yeah.
So that was, I guess, at least a good lesson to learn, and something that, because it did make me, um I think, it made me not afraid of sort of doing that kind of thing. So now,
Hmm.
like with therapy and things like that and taking medication, I never approached it as from a fear perspective, or like I'm going to lose myself.
Yeah.
Maybe I did probably a little bit in the beginning. Um, but yeah, so
Mm.
I would say, yeah, like those sorts of things. I guess, for me, paradigm shifts, it's like a lot of nudges more than
Hmm.
anything, like just little things that I think of that have led me where I am now. And we can talk about that a little later about how I came to UU and stuff, but it
Yeah.
kind of wraps into that. Just of like lots of just like I was talking about it like with you, I think, or I had mentioned it, I think, at Covenant or something, but
Hmm.
the history of the church and how it seemed to just fit with, like, it just felt like home, like to me. It
Yeah.
felt familiar,
Hmm.
like in a way that was almost creepy, considering I'd never heard of UU. And that was the other thing too, is I thought I was fairly educated about religions,
Yeah.
and I hadn't encountered UU at
Yeah.
all. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it was very, very strange. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, oh man, what you were saying about consciousness and spirituality and stuff, like I'm so glad that you're just, being honest and authentic about how you feel about that. And in some ways I don't disagree with what you're saying. And I kind of just wish that I could have the right question to ask you that might somehow bridge certain gaps between our worldviews or something,
Yeah.
but I can't seem to quite discover that right the right question.
I mean,
Um,
I do have something, I think.
yeah,
For me, I guess it's like, for me, it's always, like I said, I have a healthy skepticism, but I also, I think, have a healthy curiosity.
yeah,
Um, and because, but it's like, because of both of those things, it's like I want to know everything, but I want to
yeah.
also doubt everything. I want to
Mm,
be like, oh, um, so it's like, I wrote down some stuff about, like, in high school, I was really into like psychedelic authors. I was like, dude, I'm gonna take mushrooms and I'm gonna see stuff. I'm gonna take DMT and I'm gonna see the machine elves on the other side, and I'm gonna get to the root of this thing. And like,
mhm,
and I read a bunch of, I mean, even like some of the graphic novels. I really like Grant Morrison,
mhm.
and he's an interesting person.
Yeah,
And, I wanted to think there was something there, that there's like, that he's, because he talks about getting through, like, and like the meta, whatever, the meta text of everything,
mhm, mhm.
sort of God as meta text of what is everything. I don't know. It's very,
Yeah,
very strange and interesting, but like, and so I think that's the thing, is I've kind of gotten comfortable, and I enjoy being always on the quest,
yeah,
always on the look for something. And I think that's why UU and everything has really spoken to me. And the people I've met in UU have really spoken to me, because I think that at least links us. Like, even if they do believe things I don't believe,
right.
it's the idea of like, well, we'll keep looking. We're
Yeah,
gonna keep looking. We're gonna keep doubting. We're gonna keep that in the back of our heads. Like, I was obsessed with herbs, like, not like weed, like, like actual, like, herbal stuff in high school, like ginkgo biloba was gonna change everything, and like St. John's wort was gonna change
mhm,
everything, and like all those things. And then there were a bunch of, like, um nootropics,
yeah, mhm,
and so I got really into those, and I, like, I would, I would spend a ton of money on them, and it was just they were just disappointing ultimately. You
Mm,
know, they don't. They're I you know I learned, I was like, there is no huge shift.
mm-hmm.
Um, Now I don't think I would be as disappointed by learning that. I think, now I'm kind of like, I expect those sorts of things of like,
Yeah,
um, you know, I think that's the thing is, you can't always expect the paradigm shift or the insight,
sure.
especially from, um, I don't know. I think that I've heard about that with like practices. Like, I read a great book and I wish I could remember what it was, but on Zazen one time. And what struck me was just how honest the author was about how miserable it was and how, just awful it was every day sitting there and just
Yeah.
sitting, and like how uncomfortable you got and how much it hurt. And like, I really appreciated that because it was like, and there were insights, you do benefit from
Mm,
the process,
mm-hmm.
but it's not a big insight. And I don't think it's things you can really share with someone either.
Mm,
The process is there is no map. Like,
right.
the whole like, and I think that's the interesting thing about, I guess, like spiritual practices and why I'm just really skeptical of them. Like, I don't think there is a map. Like, I don't think there's um, an inevitability to things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you start doing this, and like, you're gonna feel like this, and or like, oh, you're gonna reach enlightenment. Which,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
know that now, and that's not always the goal, and there are lots of schools
Mm-hmm.
of thought on that. That's very,
Mm-hmm.
um, but some people may think with that sort of mentality of like, I'm gonna
Right.
get something big, and
Yeah.
it doesn't always happen.
Oh man, you're bringing up such good stuff. This is awesome. Some things that came to mind, number one is like after my college religious fervor,
Mhm.
and then once I found Buddhism and started reading about Zen, that shattered a lot of my preconceptions, and it shattered a lot of ideas that I had that made me feel comfortable or something.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the ground had fallen out, but in a good way. Like it was really liberating and it was empowering and it was generative because I was suddenly like, okay, whoa, I need to kind of start at the ground again. Like, and and I love that about Zen. I'm glad you brought up Zen. I've been drawn to Zen since 2007 when some of those shifts started happening for me.
Mhm.
And I still, I go to Angel City Zen Center and stuff, and I love Zen for a lot of reasons, but one of those is what you were saying, like how honest it is and how it doesn't, um, the Zen folks, they discourage a desire for enlightenment, kind of.
Okay.
It's like, when we're trying to create something by sitting zazen, for example, or trying to reach somewhere by sitting zazen, that kind of defeats the purpose from a Zen perspective.
Yeah.
Because like Dogen, who started the Soto Zen school in Japan in like the 1200s, I think, he you know he's famous for saying that like practice itself is enlightenment, sitting itself is enlightenment, not what you get from it. It's
Right.
just the practice itself is the enlightenment. So
I like that.
I like all that stuff, and I just want to say that like after I had all of my preconceptions shattered around 2007, I started trying to start from the ground again and piece together things for myself, from my own direct experience. And I got into Thoreau and Emerson and Whitman and stuff, and they really helped me with that sort of thing because they were spiritual in their own way, but it was all about direct experience. It wasn't about inherited belief systems. It wasn't about inherited ideology. It was about a direct experience and a kind of experimenting with your own life. Your own existence is a laboratory.
Mhm.
Um, and then over time, um, from about 2010 to 2000, I don't know. There was a stretch of years there where I became extremely like skepticism was kind of what what I honored as kind of um, the authentic tool to discover truth was skepticism for me. And I'm glad I still have a level of skepticism, and I'm glad I went through that period. Um, and I'm glad that you said like skepticism and curiosity kind of as partners, you know. That's been true for me in certain ways. Um, I think nowadays I kind of honor curiosity more than skepticism. I think a healthy dose of skepticism is always important for sure, but
Yeah.
I had gotten to the point in my life for a while where my extreme skepticism kind of started to close my mind to possibilities instead of leaving my mind open. You
Right.
know, it's kind of like there's almost two modes of agnosticism or something, where like you can have an agnosticism that is more kind of saying, oh well, I don't know, but I'm not like, I don't even necessarily know how to characterize the first type of agnosticism, but the second type is like not knowing but being completely open to any possibilities,
Right.
you know. And that's kind of where I got to. So it's like I went from this deeply religious thing to discovering Buddhism that shattered all my preconceptions, to a deep skepticism, and then to an kind of an open-minded agnosticism. And then um you know, nowadays I'm still agnostic about certain things for sure, because there are certain things that I think that we just can't know with with our limited mind and our five senses,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm still agnostic about certain things in that way, because I think it's arrogant for people to say that this is the capital T truth about the big questions of the universe. I just can't go that far. But because of that, because I think that there's got to be a certain level of humility in our existential, or if you're comfortable, like for me, I use the word spiritual, and
Yeah.
some people, you know, I understand why people can be resistant to that word for sure. Like I understand why you're resistant to that word, because
Mhm.
for one, I mean, the word spiritual already is just kind of so vague and ambiguous.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm at a point, you know, in 2019, I started going through another shift, and that was I, well, I guess I found UU and I found the church in late 2018. Um, but so I guess I was so grateful to find that church, because I never thought I was ever going to go to any sort of church again or be part of any sort of religious community outside of the Zen Center. But then in 2019, I just had, have you read Robert Anton Wilson?
Of course. Yeah. Love him.
Yeah, I figured you
One
had.
of my favorite people. Yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
well,
I've been rereading some of his stuff, and it's like it definitely needs updating.
right.
Um, but yeah, he's one of my favorite writers. I love him.
Well, before, you know, I guess I'll kind of just wrap up what I was saying, and then I want to ask you a little bit about Robert Anton Wilson too. Um, but yeah, so basically, Robert Anton Wilson, among other things, and I've been into Robert Anton Wilson for years and years, but like I had never read his book Cosmic Trigger,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
people always told me how good it was, and then like I actually heard stories of people who, after they read that book, like all sorts of weird synchronicities started happening. Like there's like a weird gravity around that book. It's strange, but like I read it in 2019, and it really did cause a shift in me, and it made me kind of like reframe my seeking, I guess I will say. Like and it made me reframe it in the way of starting to just be experimental. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like Robert Anton Wilson was very experimental in his own search and his own um, exploration of reality.
Mhm.
And he had that open-minded agnosticism. You know, he considered himself like an agnostic mystic or mystical agnostic,
Yeah.
whatever. And I really love that, and I've always loved that about him. But after reading Cosmic Trigger, I just got on I had this catalyst. I felt this catalyst to just kind of start having an experimental approach to my own spirituality, and trying different things, and looking at the world through different lenses to see what the results might be from doing that. And so, I'm at a point now where I just I'm writing a book trying to really synthesize a lot of different things that I've learned from different traditions, and also go have my own commentary on those things. But it's hard for me not to feel drawn to spirituality, because I just kind of feel like I said earlier, like existence itself is such a mystery and a miracle to me, that that's really the foundation of my spirituality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I'm curious about anything you might have to say about any of the stuff I just said. And what is it that you love so much about Robert Anton Wilson?
Oh, okay. Yeah. First, I mean, I did go through, the period probably in high school starting, and a little bit after, of the sort of angry atheist, the sort of God doesn't exist. Why are you idiots?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
like, why are you not listening to me? And like, I don't know,
Right.
very, I don't know, especially young white men go through that phase, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think now really what I'm looking for is I don't know how to, it's like, to use actually a phrase from Robert Anton Wilson, but it's like respecting everybody's reality tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, to an extent, it is important whether God exists. Like, obviously, to many people that question is super important. To me, however, it's not as an important question to me as how are we going to coexist.
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to create a future for humanity? How are we going to organize that future?
Mm-hmm.
Those are sort of, and when, like, I'm trying to think. Let me see actually some of my notes here. I guess, yeah, like, that's sort of like, I just want to be able to respect individual experience,
Mm-hmm.
Without mocking it, without sort of, judging it
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat. I mean, I'm still going to evaluate it. I'm still going to do those things, but then to be like, okay, well, this was their experience. I do remember I read a book, very awesome book, called Crazy All the Time.
Mm.
And it was the person in charge of, I think, the residents at Bellevue. And so it was different stories about each resident and the patients they had. And one woman had been convinced that there was this huge pedophile ring that she was a part of when she was a child in 1935 or something, that went all the way up to the president. And it was in the Air Force. Her dad was in the Air, and she had this whole story. And the resident was like, "Oh my God, like, we have to investigate this and everything." And went to the head and was like, talked about it, and was like, well, none of that's true. We looked into all this. Like, none of this happened. She never lived here. She, like, it's a delusion. It's,
Mm-hmm.
So then the resident was like, well, we have to tell her it's not true. Like, one, she's living this horrible life. Like, she thinks these horrible things happen to her. And it was like, no, you don't do that. Like, the point isn't like, how do you think her life is going to be if you try to tell her that it's all a lie?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, one, it's probably not going to work, but also, like, this is it's a delusion. So I don't know. It's just, to me, it was like, the thing was to just make sure that it's like, well, is she a danger to herself or others? Is she, does it seem to, and it actually seemed to, provide stability for her life. To believe these things happen, because it gave her a cause. It gave her something to, And I mean that's kind of, I don't know if that's mean or something to talk about, but like, because it's not like everybody's delusional or something, but
Right.
to an extent, I think we are sort of, um, we create meaning in our
Yeah.
minds, and
Oh yeah.
we assign meaning to things, and I mean that's really, I know you have a question about your personal philosophy. I mean, you say
Hmm.
spiritual again, but and I guess, as a philosophy, I think that's, or as a spirituality, even, like, I don't think there is a spirituality. I think that is the thing, is there's, but we create the meaning out of things. So, um, I don't know how to describe this. It's getting, Plato.
Hmm.
Have you read
Hmm.
like the Republic? I mean, not like,
Yeah.
of course, like I mean, people have heard of Plato, yes. Um, I mean, did you read the Republic, or anything? Have you read the? I've only
I
read
haven't read that full thing. I've read passages of
yeah,
Plato. I've
same
read stuff
here.
about Plato.
Yeah, same. I've never read the entire thing. I've read a few excerpts and stuff, but the one that really stuck with me was, we discussed it in a class I was in. I was just talking about, like, the big lie, that because
Hmm.
society is based on a big lie, and the lie is about your blood, and where your position in society is, and it's like the gold and the silver, and nobody's better than each other, even though obviously, like, some people are, like, but it was like, that's just how it is. And um to an extent, I think it's like we all have to come up with a big lie
Hmm.
to tell ourselves, because ultimately, I think the idea of meaning in the universe is meaningless. I don't
Hmm.
think the universe is meaningless. I wouldn't know what its meaning is, but, like, I think
Hmm.
the idea that we're gonna figure out a perfect path that everybody has to walk, or anything like that, is just, like, it doesn't make any
Oh
sense.
yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So, we generate these meanings out of the fact that, I think it's we couldn't live if we believed it was meaningless. I mean,
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, it would be very difficult, to keep going.
Yeah.
But so, the big lie I kind of, start with, is the idea, is sort of like, that there's meaning. And that, and then from there, it's like we generate these meanings, and then it's like, well, what meanings are serving us, what
Hmm.
meanings are not serving us,
Hmm.
um you know how do they serve us, what are they in service to, um and I try to apply that, especially, getting more into, like, society, and into, like, political side of things. It's like, I try to really look at the systems, and think, is this serving society, is this serving human beings,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
and what does it actually do?
Hmm.
Because one thing, I've been really getting into lately is prison abolition.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I think, if I make it through divinity school and stuff, and I would like to maybe do some chaplaincy, for prisons, um,
Cool.
but also as part of a bigger thing to agitate for abolition. Because, when I think about it, it's like, does this serve? Who does this serve? Like,
Hmm.
even on a basic level, it's like, I'm like, okay, somebody got a DUI. We're gonna throw them in a cage for a long time, and not let them talk to anybody, not let them really socialize properly. Like, we're gonna just
Yeah.
basically, like, try to make it. It's the punitive idea, but it's like the person doesn't need to be punished. They probably need some help,
Yep.
um, in some way. Like,
Hmm.
99% of crime is because somebody needs something.
Yep.
They're or
Yep.
or they're fulfilling what they think is a need.
Hmm.
Inequality drives these ideas that we need other things. So it's like, I mean, I think that is the biggest predictor of crime, is actually inequality. um, Areas that have the most stark inequality have the largest crime levels, because also, I think, I don't remember what it is, but an insane amount of most crime is property crime.
Hmm.
Like, the largest chunk of crime is property crime. Violent crime is almost nothing at this
Right.
point.
Right.
um, it's actually quite interesting because, you know, looking at some sites, you'd think it was the opposite, you know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
violent crime was like 80%, but it's like 1.2%. I don't even know what it is. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But most of it's property crime, and it's, you know, because inequality kind of feeds into those ideas that, you know, these are not just things you want, but things you need, that you must have them. You must, in order to fit in and in order to be a person in the society, you know, you need to have money, or you need to have a car, or you need to have whatever it is, respect, you know, things like that. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but it's like, it's like, it's prison is there, it doesn't fix anything. I guess is the thing, is it doesn't fix the problems, any of them.
Oh,
It
it
doesn't
makes
fix
them
the
worse,
problem.
really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It exacerbates, especially for the individual. You know, anything that, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I don't know. Just thinking about it as like even a big picture thing. You know, it's like the way we incarcerate people in this country. You know, it's like especially the poor. You know, and it's like they probably already have generational trauma from, you know,
Yep.
from being poor, and for, you know, it's just, it's
Yep.
ridiculous. And
Yep.
then I don't know, it's, to me it's like prison just doesn't make any sense. Like obviously we need to do something with people who are violent and stuff, but even then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
is the best thing to lock them in a cage and then basically hope that they,
No.
what are we hoping for, that they get better, then we're going to let them
Right.
out? Like, oh, you must have gotten
Right.
better while we locked you. I mean, I don't know, it's, it literally,
Yeah.
my, like when I try to think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
for probably, you know, 90% of crime, we don't need prisons. And that 10%, we don't need to
Mm-hmm.
make it look like a prison. We need to make it a
Right.
center, a place, you know. I know that there are some, I think there was a Scandinavian country that was actually experimenting with, basically it's like a farm, like a working farm. And the inmates have to work the farm in order to survive. And, you know, obviously there are guards and stuff, but it's like, you know,
Right.
they basically, they get, you know, it's like, I mean, they're not going to starve them if they don't, but it's like, you know, it's sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it does, things like that do help. And
Seems healthier.
yeah, it's just, I don't understand it. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, you brought some good stuff up. I mean, that whole emphasis on like um, looking at what's the if, in terms of spirituality, like what's the use of it? Some people find it useful, some claim to find it useful, but it ends up having a negative impact on their lives. Some people, their spiritual orientation makes them have more compassion and love for others and want to serve others. And then some people's spiritual orientation makes them feel better than others and judgmental of others. There's
Mhm.
so many different reality tunnels
Okay.
in spirituality and outside of spirituality, of course.
Yeah.
And so I like that question of like, who is this serving? And asking for ourselves, like any of our reality tunnels or lenses that we look at the world through, like how are those lenses impacting our lives on a practical level, on like a
Yeah.
tangible level, and because like from a Buddhist perspective with the whole emptiness thing, it's like reality itself is empty of all of the stories that we tell about reality, right? Reality itself just is. The universe just is. It's empty of all of the concepts and the notions and the maps that we put on top of it. Like the territory is empty of the maps that we put on top of it,
Hmm.
even though that does get a little complicated because at the end of the day, I think that the territory or the maps are reality too in their own way, but anyways, let's just stick with this idea that like reality is, and reality is empty of the narratives that we put on top of it.
Right. Yeah.
And so um that's true, but kind of related to what you were saying, at the end of the day, we're going to have big lies. We're going to have narratives because otherwise we need we need a navigation system. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we're going to just feel completely lost and chaotic and maybe hopeless, right? So
Mhm.
it's like we need narratives to tell ourselves about ourselves in the world and about others. And we're going to, no matter how much we cultivate or embrace emptiness or something, we're still going to have narratives. Our ego is basically just our self narrative, right? Like,
Yeah.
but we're gonna have that. We're gonna have a sense of self, because
Yeah.
that's just how it is to be in a world where we're living among others and part of a society. Like, you have a sense of self, and that's okay. You can't cling too much to that, and you realize that it is a narrative. It's not like, it is just an idea, kind of, but it's a necessary idea.
Yeah.
So I think maybe my point about all that is just to say that, even though reality itself is empty of the narratives we put on top of it, we are still going to have narratives, and we might as well create the meaning and the narratives that are the most that are the most constructive and the healthiest, that actually bring people together and help us have love for ourselves and others, and
Yeah.
want give us the desire to create a world where people are treated fairly, and justice is something that thrives rather than injustice, and all the things that UU is all about. And I think that that's probably why, kind of something else you touched on, like, in at the church and in the UU community, it's like people might not have the same cosmology, or they might not have the same spiritual views or whatever. Some do, some don't, whatever. There's a variety, which is what's so beautiful about it. But nevertheless, despite the differences in worldviews or something, we all kind of share this vision of wanting people to be treated more fairly, and wanting a society that is fueling the better parts of our nature, right? That is fueling actually all of the positive potential that we have as human beings. And I think that that's one cool thing about the history of Unitarianism and Universalism, is that from a Christian context, there was so often, especially with like Puritanism and stuff, there was so often this emphasis on the fallen state of humanity, the sinfulness, the inherent evil of nature, basically, human nature. But Unitarians and Universalists, among other things, they were always like, whoa, like, let's honor and celebrate the positive potential of humans, and the fact that they didn't put the emphasis on the fallenness of us. They put the emphasis on the potential of us. And that's one thing I really like about both of those traditions and UU as they come together. And so.
Oh, and Robert Anton Wilson, I didn't talk about.
Oh yeah. Please tell me anything. What is it that you love so much about him?
I was first introduced, I want to say, I mean, this is when I was in high school, so it must have been high school. No, probably just out of high school. So probably like 1999 or so. He had a book on like conspiracy theories. I just always been fascinated by that stuff. I mean, and like UFOs and like, I mean, all that stuff. I just always had a fascination for that kind of thing. Again, I'm skeptical of it all, but I have a curiosity about it. And I guess, something that I do want to say too is that, skepticism isn't pessimism. That there's a big difference. And I think, I do detect, I do detect a really big pessimism now. And that's something I think, that we need to create meaning to combat. That we need, like you said, this idea of a vision. Let me jump, actually, because I do want to respond to what you were saying too. It made me think of something about history, and like history is sort of the same thing. Like, I love that idea of like the map or the territory is not the map that we project on it. And it's like, to me, history is the same way. I was thinking about that recently, trying to get my head around some concepts of history, because I'm not really sure just my relationship with it, and what I actually believe about it, and just in general, So I was trying to think, and it's like, I mean, it's sort of, it's like we're not getting at a truth through history. We're telling stories. We're putting a story on it, but those stories are very important because they're what we invest in as truth, or at least accept as partial truth.
Mhm.
And so, it's incredibly important, what stories are told and how much and that they're backed up by facts and stuff, that they are backed up by good research. I'm a little iffy on facts too, but in terms of just like not every fact, I don't know. It's tough because like facts aren't necessarily like we can still react to facts emotionally and stuff. You know what I mean? They still have they can carry baggage with them.
Mhm.
Um, and so we still have to tell a story about them then. Like that
Right.
baggage requires us then to say, oh, well, this was good or this was bad or I don't like this or,
Right.
whatever it was, or this was important for this reason. Like we have to evaluate it then. We have to tell these stories and, but history itself is not a story. It's not like where's the beginning and end? Like that's the thing is
Mhm.
we make them. So it's like when I tell the story of Abraham Lincoln, I'm picking a beginning and, an
Right.
end. And that's, um, and where I pick those beginning and ends are going to change your picture of who he was,
Totally.
So it's like, these stories and stuff are just so interesting and how they, just the importance of telling not the right ones, because there are no right ones, but telling
Right.
which ones we tell are important and they're going to
Yes.
determine which directions we go.
Yes.
Um, and so, I prefer ones that challenge.
Mhm.
I don't like there's a big thing now. I was just reading about, can we talk about politics on
Sure, of course,
this?
yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The GOP, especially, they've been introducing a bunch of bills to like limit discussion of slavery, that sort of thing, and not even that, but it's like the story they want to tell about it is
Mhm.
a lie.
Yeah.
It's a lost cause lie, and
Mhm.
they're very into that. um, and it's important then, it's important to challenge that idea and to help, these structures that even allow those ideas of this sort of, you know, just I guess bigger falsehood. If we're gonna go
Mhm.
with everything sort of, that, these are lies we tell ourselves, but it's like, the meaning that we're deriving from them is teaches us nothing. Like I think
Mhm.
that's what I hate the most about it is it literally and not even literally, but figuratively whitewashes history in two ways.
Mhm.
So like not only does it center whiteness in history, but it pastes over actual history. They do
Right.
away with a bunch of history. And so I don't know, it's just that level of um incuriosity, I think, is what I would
Right.
determine really just speaks to me because it's like I don't think we have to listen to every perspective. I don't believe that. I mean, there are some where it's just I don't think they're worth listening to.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I wish I were more patient sometimes, and I wish I had that ability. But sometimes I'm just like this person is not worth it.
Mhm.
But I don't know where I'm going with that. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's,
Mhm.
either way. Anyway, Robert Anton Wilson. I was gonna ask, Cosmic Trigger's the one with all the exercises. Is that the one?
It's got exercises, yes, but I think,
I always like
um,
that one. Yeah,
quantum psychology
I've read that
is
one too.
quantum psychology, that was the first one I read from him, it was amazing, but it has a lot of exercises.
Okay, yeah, I like his exercises. I was gonna say I really like that. That spoke to me a lot. But just his, um, I guess something that spoke to me really a lot, and I is just. I mean, I have a ton of anxiety, but it's lack of fear. I don't really have like a fear toward learning new things or finding out about things. Um, I mean, I'm so interested in especially what people do. You know, I mean, good and bad. Like,
Mhm.
it's not. I mean, like I said, I love horror films. seen
Hmm.
just about every horror film, and they don't shock me. They don't, they're not. I like them. I enjoy them, but like, it's but then, real news stories, I'll be fascinated by them, but I'm not. I guess there's not the fear of learning.
Mm, that's good. I feel the
I
same way.
always wonder, it's like, what are people afraid they're going to learn? You know, like, what are they
Right.
afraid, or what are they afraid is going to happen to them if they learn about somebody else's lifestyle or somebody else's
Right.
culture?
Right.
I remember, after 9/11 and stuff, that was really
Hmm.
anyway, like, just the amount of racism, that was
Hmm.
on full display. I mean, and that's not
Yeah.
like it doesn't exist anymore or anything like that, but just, how it was just, but it was also just the incuriosity of not even wanting to. It was like, if you knew anything about if you even tried to learn about the Taliban and why they were doing things, then it was like, you're an enemy.
Right.
And it was like, there's a political thing behind this and a personal thing and a social thing behind all of this stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know all the answers. I mean, I know there's a lot of, it's like there's a bunch of connections. It's like, Osama bin Laden was Saudi Arabian. It's like
Right.
the Taliban was, partially, funded by the CIA technically.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's like all these sorts of things that are, but yeah, it was just this sort of incuriosity about the actual, like, it was like, oh, if we learn something about it and admit that maybe we aren't 100% good or right.
Saying like, I think part of that fear that people have to learn new things or stretch their mind to consider things that are outside of their, small little reality tunnel,
Hmm.
it's because they don't want to change their narrative. They're scared that by learning something new, it's going to challenge
Hmm.
their narrative, and they don't want that because then they feel like the ground is going to be pulled from under them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think people go through actual distress from it. I think they do. I think they can. That it actually, I think it's like, it becomes part of your fight or flight response, and you
Hmm.
want to flee from it, or you want to defend against it. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I don't know. I find that I hate that. And that's something that's really tough, because how do you get through to people who just don't even want to listen from the outset?
Yeah.
But I think there are
Yeah.
ways. I am. I don't know. I've always, I think, been pretty good at bridging certain um, divides like that. Like, I was in the military, and they're, they tend to skew a little conservative.
Hmm.
I tend to
Hmm.
skew very far left. Um,
Did
but
you feel that way? Did you skew very far left when you were in the military?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Did you find any, did you have any conflict with people about that?
yes. I mean, and no. I would say, it was never significant. I mean, I think, I obviously I have a lot of privilege being who I am in certain respects. Just the way I look, the way I can act, I present, how I present and everything. I think, is very. I don't know. It's like, yeah, like, people didn't really mess with me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not like, oh, I'm tough and blah blah blah. It was like, I wasn't there to be like, I wasn't someone who would necessarily, they would do that to.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't encounter it a lot. I actually encountered, there are leftists in the military too. I think a lot of what I encountered more was just sort of political ignorance, and like,
Hmm.
and that was what I realized. It's like, you should talk to people who, think differently than you, and sometimes you'll reach
Yeah.
sometimes you won't reach anybody, but it's still worth it. You're going to learn something. Um,
Yeah.
and I learned, a lot of times they just hadn't thought about it. They
Yeah.
hadn't considered it. I pointed out, one time we were in where were we? We were in Iraq, and people were like, why are they shooting at us? Like, why are they? And I was like, dude, you're gonna tell me that a fucking armed military rolls up into your neighborhood back home, So a lot of these people, they pride themselves on having a bunch of guns and stuff. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna tell me you're not gonna come out shooting?
Yeah.
Like, are
Right.
you kidding me? Like,
Right.
it was just like, how can you not see this? And like, a lot of them hadn't considered that. They hadn't considered that it's like everyone here isn't sort of an enemy. They're people defending their homes,
Yeah.
people scared shitless. You know, it was tough. I gotta say, that's one of the tougher, I guess, experiences of my life because it's hard to evaluate it, and I certainly can't evaluate it objectively in any respect.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also hard to be like, well, I can't disavow it. I did it.
Right.
Um, but it did, like I said, it got me around a lot of people that I wouldn't normally be around, and I do
Mm-hmm.
appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
I try to appreciate the lessons that I learned from things like that. And sometimes, like I said, the lesson is you just can't deal with certain people, and
Yeah.
maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I
and
mean, there's some people you just can't get through to, and it's
yeah,
like, why waste your time and energy? I mean, I'm somebody who, it's like I'm an optimist. So I always want to believe that everybody's mind can be changed. But
yeah.
the truth is that a lot of people just are so solidified in their view of things, or
Well, I
their
think a lot of systems need to
yeah.
change before people can change.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of so many people in the military. What does bind a lot of them, at least enlisted, is that they come from poor means. Most of them, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know most of them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's um, they call it a draft for a poor draft or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
um, or poverty draft. That's what it's called,
Mm-hmm.
poverty draft, because it's like so many people. It's like there's a necessity almost to go in.
Right.
And so there is sort of a unity in that respect, of understanding at least, and being able to talk to people. I think on that level is important too, of just understanding where people come from. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say the systems that need to change. It's like a lot of them then, because it's like for everybody. I mean, not just for anybody, not just poor, but it's like access to education.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Capitalism sort of makes us, I don't know, it pushes us into these horrible, unhealthy behaviors, and
Mm-hmm.
rewards so many terrible things.
True.
Um, so I think a lot of those systems can change, and it will change a lot of people's mindsets. I think
Yeah, that's a good point.
because a lot of times it's they don't realize that they're not as free as they think. And if they had that freedom, then they may be like, oh, you don't have to be stuck in this job.
Mm-hmm.
You can explore something, and then maybe they'll figure out, oh crap, like I actually want to be a painter. I don't know. It's
Right.
it's just
Yeah, they've never even taken the liberty to access that freedom that they have, because they're just kind of so indoctrinated, and
yeah,
they're it's like most of us are just dwelling in some self-created prison.
yeah. And I mean, even I guess it's like, even it's like I get into the mindsets, different mindsets of, I read now, I read stuff from 10, well, more like 13 years ago or whatever that I wrote. And I'm just kind of embarrassed by
Mm-hmm.
some of the
Me too.
mindsets I had. And I'm just like, oh, wow. Especially toward women and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never considered myself, you know, terrible, obviously.
Right.
I hope not,
Right.
but no, it's like there are obviously mentalities and stuff that you always have to be looking out for. You
Totally.
evaluating yourself, I think, I mean, that is philosophy, right? Like know thyself.
Yep.
Like
Exactly.
that's the first dictate of philosophy,
Yes.
um and that's going to take you your whole life, if you
Yes.
can try. Like you're never going to do it. You're
Right.
never going to get to it, but like yeah, it's at least
Yeah, there's no final product really. It's just a
yeah.
constant process.
And was it
Um
Thoreau that said the unexamined? No, who said the unexamined life is not worth living?
that's a good question. I'm not positive about that. It might have been Thoreau. It sounds like something Thoreau would say, but for some reason, examine life is not okay. Who said that? Oh, apparently it was attributed to Socrates.
Socrates. Okay,
Shout out. Socrates is the man. I love Socrates.
that's awesome.
Well, hey man, on this topic, as a last leg here,
Yeah.
because we've been going for almost an hour and a half, but it's
Oh
been
yeah.
great. And
I haven't
um,
even gotten into like stuff that I really wanted to talk about.
well, we can have a part two, because I mean, I would love to just keep on riffing with you, but for one, on a logistical level, when the file when the file is too big on my iPad, I can't even, like, my whole
Yeah.
system shuts down and I can't even edit it or whatever. So
Mhm.
we should do a part two and we can dive into all sorts of things.
I would actually like that because there's a couple big topics that I think would be pretty interesting that are a little more into
Okay.
like philosophy and stuff and sort of
Oh no, yeah, that's perfect. I mean, honestly, I've loved this conversation, and I love that
yeah,
it's gone in organic directions, and I've appreciated your commentary on all the stuff we've talked about.
it's been really
And part two for sure. I'm pretty much asking all the guests that I'm having to come back for a part two, because it's kind of cool to, like, lay down the foundation for part one, and then part two we kind of
yeah.
can use that and go in different directions.
Mhm.
But as a last note, related to what you were just saying, about people realizing that they might not have to just keep following some mold that was given to them or whatever, like, and in relation to your life, and in the last few months, I know um you've been examining yourself and examining what you want out of your life, and you've thought about different directions you might want to go, and that eventually led you to want to apply for the Thomas Starr King seminary
Mhm.
in Berkeley to try to pursue UU ministry. So I'm very curious about that. Like, can you say anything about how you came to that direction?
Um, yeah, I don't want to talk. I mean, how much time do we actually have? How much time?
I mean, maybe 10
Okay.
or 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, because I know there are two questions. The one is how did you find UU and how did I decide to do the seminary? And I think it's like, it's important to cover sort of how I found UU first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'll try to, make it like to I'll turn it into a story. Give it some meaning. Um,
Yeah.
so it's like I've been in therapy for a while, and I was in therapy, and I have a lot of social anxiety, and especially we had just moved out only a few years ago, but I mean I guess it's like some people would already have a bunch of friends. I have a few friends. I'm not a social person, um, but I'm trying to get better at that, and so in therapy I've been working on that a lot, and it happened to align with, it was like, my therapist was like, well, I really wanted to start doing some social justice stuff. I was really interested in that. I was really inspired by Margaret, partially because she does, her work is just so, I mean, it's horrible, it's really difficult to do, and it's just the deck is stacked against you, but it's like, I don't know, there's something. So, it's helping people. It's
Yeah.
really putting your principles and values at work.
Yeah.
And I realized I had been kind of missing that like my
Hmm.
whole life, basically, because partially because of my anxiety and because of my sort of you know, not wanting to get out there, not really putting myself out there. Um so, I looked up, I finally, I worked on it, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do something. I'm going to find something in LA. So I looked up social justice,
Mm.
uh, volunteer, like it was like social justice volunteer opportunities or something like that. And the church came up, and I started reading about it, and I was like, this place sounds fucking awesome. I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
man, all this stuff. And so I reached out, and I'm trying to even think of how we came to one thing. Like we came to a service.
Hmm.
I told Margaret about it, and she was like, "Well, sure, yeah, let's go check it out." She was willing to come with me, which again really helps. Having
Yeah.
I don't know if I mean, again, would I have gone if she hadn't come with? I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm really glad we did, and we met some people, and then I think it was like the library was moving the first time I came, like they were moving the library, so I volunteered to move some books,
Nice.
and I was like, yeah, sure, that's something, I can help out and do that, and so I moved some books, and I met Aaron and a few other people, and um, it was great. Everyone was really super nice, and I liked the contents of the sermons. I thought, the lay led thing was, I mean, that's one thing that kind of worries me actually about, that's why I'm thinking more chaplaincy maybe for me rather than like being a minister, because it
Mm-hmm.
just depends. I mean, if I don't know that I would want to be minister of a church. Like,
Mm.
I don't know that I would want to be the person speaking every week. I would want it to be like our church, it's like
Yeah.
different speakers, different people coming in, different
No, I
perspectives,
love that.
just like, you know, um, that's what something that keeps me coming back, and just how easy it was to get involved.
Yeah.
They Sarah was like, you want to write some grants, and I was like, I'll try, and got us some money, and it feels really good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And now I'm on the board, and I'm learning like so much stuff, about being on a board, and that's teaching me, like, I can't even, I feel like I'm finally, like, I felt like a treasurer for, like, a real treasurer yesterday, because I was like, I will check the budget and confirm or something like that. It's just like I was asking a question about some budgetary matter, and I was like, oh man, I feel like I never thought I would feel like a treasurer, but like, I felt like a treasurer then, and so
Yeah.
it's been really positive, and it's just been really helping me with my social anxiety and um, with my desire to do things. I mean, social justice, it's like there hasn't been as much, I think, just because of COVID. Obviously, put a stop to a lot of things, but I'm looking forward to how much we can do, and our potential,
Mm-hmm.
and we are growing um, pretty amazingly, honestly, I think, and we have the potential to grow and do a lot
Yeah.
of outreach coming up. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was really cool, and like I said, I kind of, the more I explore it, the more it just feels right for me. Um,
Mhm.
so for the seminary, I looked up their programs, and they sound well. One, I also kind of just got with that. I was unemployed for a little while. I finished school in 2019, but then I was unemployed for a long time, and it sucked. And then I finally got a job, and I'm working from home, and I love the company. They're amazing, but the job itself, it's just not. Oh God, hopefully they don't see this. It's not inspiring me, I guess. It's not, you know what I mean? I guess it's not impactful in a way that I want to be impactful. And so that
Mm-hmm.
kind of made me think, oh well, should I go back to school? And then what would I go to school for? And I know that I do want to work with, like I said, social justice causes. Um, Star King, they have like their divinity degree is not like a typical one at all. Like it's you do like countering oppressions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You do like essentially social justice work. You learn how to do like group stuff. You learn how to organize. Um, I mean, you also learn about the ministry. You learn how to lead, to write sermons. You learn all that stuff, like how to but which I'm very interested in too. Is how to deal,
Mm-hmm.
um, how to actually, I guess, when I think about it, it's like the verb or whatever, to minister or whatever. Yeah, but no, the curriculum sounds amazing. What they,
That sounds exciting.
and you study, you do comparative religious studies. You have to learn everybody's sort of um, rituals, which again, I got really sort of interested in rituals and how they apply, because I've never really been a ritual person that I know of, but um, I do, have sort of, when I think about it, I think everybody does, but it's just they have specific things they do. I guess that would fit under rituals that you don't think about, but it's like, I always have my phone on my wallet on top of this, and if
Right.
it's not like that, then it feels weird. Um, so like, or just little things that we do, every time. But yeah, I just never thought about it in the terms of actual specific group rituals and
Hmm.
group stuff. And honestly, it was a horror film. This is gonna be pretty funny, but it was a horror film that kind of um, really got me sort of. I watched it around the same time that we had started going to the church, and they kind of got linked in my head. Speaking of creating,
Mm.
speaking of like creating meaning, you know what I mean? Like this is uh,
Hmm.
a perfect way we do it. It was just the juxtaposition of it at the time. Um, Midsommar, did you watch that?
I was gonna say, was it Midsummer?
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that movie.
yeah, and it was the expression of, I think, the communal grief scene
Hmm.
that really spoke to me. And then the communal grief scene really spoke to me. And then seeing, the sharing your joys and sorrows, you
Yeah.
know, I sort of kind of connected them and really, um, I don't know. Midsommar, I think, is a brilliant movie anyway. It's just like, or Midsummer, I'm not,
Same.
yeah.
I
I don't
love it.
know. Yeah, but yeah, it's just so good. And there's so much like just about the trauma and leading people through trauma and like having the right guides and stuff. To me, it's actually a positive movie, even though it's this dark
Hmm.
sort of, you know,
Yeah, it gets really dark.
really like, I mean, but it has, like I said, it's definitely, they present a lot of interesting imagery and just
Yeah,
sort of
for sure.
like, I don't think, people should jump off a rock when they're however old, I don't think that. But
Uh-huh.
no, the ideas of like sharing in grief and sharing in things and sort of creating these rituals um,
Yeah,
that we go through, I think is very important for people. I think we're sort of built that way
for sure.
for heuristics and sort of like patterns. And so, that is one of the things about, like, I never thought I would go to church ever. Um, but now it's like, the ritual of it is sort of like, I get it a little bit, it's
Yeah.
like I don't go every Sunday, but I try to go most Sundays now. And it's like, it is just sort of like getting there, sitting there with other people, listening to the same speaker. Um,
Hmm.
there is something different about it. And I think, again, we are social creatures, so we're drawn to these sorts of experiences. And I don't know, it's interesting.
As far as ritual goes, like when I was younger, I used to be really resistant to ritual, and I thought that it was kind of just something that made people, it ended up making whatever they were doing, it like deadened it or something like that by making it ritualistic. But I've changed my mind about that, and I think that rituals can be extremely important for individuals and communities. And like you were saying, since we are social creatures, it seems like ritual can just be this very useful tool that can make us feel closer together.
Yeah,
And with the whole narrative thing that we talked about, it's like some rituals can lead to negative results, obviously, just like some narratives can. But other rituals can really have positive impacts on individuals and communities. So yeah, I'm super curious about what happens for you as far as the Star King
oh yeah,
school. And if you get accepted, which I hope you do, I don't know what that looks like, but like, would you move up to Berkeley, I guess?
I would probably do most of it online. I think they
Okay,
are offering right now. It's like 90% of it's online,
sweet.
and then,
Oh, cool.
and then yeah, and then I think I would have to go for like a month, like a month every semester or something like that. Which, yeah, sure. I'm gonna hate living in Berkeley for a month, I'm sure. Like, I don't, I mean, I don't
Right.
think we could afford living there permanently, honestly. Or even, I mean, we can maybe afford Oakland, but
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, right now Margaret's actually looking for other jobs in LA, so
Hmm.
we're probably going to be here for a while. We weren't really sure we were, honestly. Um,
Mm.
we don't like LA. We don't really love it. We don't hate it. We just sort of, Um,
Hmm.
but no, we'll probably be here for a while now. So.
Yeah, I hope so. And once the church opens back up, I'm looking forward to hanging out with y'all and hanging out
Right.
with
Should
everybody
have-
else in person and really taking advantage of the library too.